welcome to another Raise3D Livestream. We're back in the demo studio. As always, my name is Nick. Today I'm joined by Micheal O'Neill from Rennch.
What's up? Awesome. It's so cool to be here and see all the tech around me. I'm super nerdy about all this stuff, so it's really neat. Thanks for having me.
Printers here, finally in the studio. Fantastic having you in the office, actually. I know we talked about bringing you back in here and kind of the collaboration we're doing, working on the Blasphemy build and stuff.
Yeah.
But you want to just catch everyone up on what you're doing, what we've been talking about, and kind of where we are right now.
I bought a Porsche race car, like a fully built Porsche race car 2 years ago. And it had been completely modified as a race car. Like the chassis had been completely cut up. It was a 1969 911S, which these days in stock form would be worth $250,000, like all day long. But it had been so modified that I had basically a blank canvas that I could work with. And I was like, I want to build this YouTube channel, which is rennch.com/YouTube. And to do that, you need kind of a build, like a long-term build. So I had this idea of, let me do this one and really annoy the purists. So what can I do to make this a blasphemous build? And so I started the Blasphemy build, which is using a twin-turbo Subaru flat six instead of the Porsche engine. And the idea was I wanted to make the car, you've heard of Resto Mod, right? I want to make this thing a techno mod. The technology that could be on a Mercedes S-Class from next year, and I could somehow invisibly integrate it into this car. I want to do it, including Alexa-enabled, windows and just crazy stuff. But just looking at it, you want to just basically see a 911 ST, just kind of vintage period correct car. So part of the design of what we've been working on is Porsche had a car called the 911R in the 60s, which had these round rear taillights instead of the sort of traditional flat, long, wide ones that they have. And so I thought, wouldn't it be cool to integrate those in modern LEDs instead of, this kind of old school.
The single bulb.
Yeah, right. The sketch I had done by this guy who was this amazing automotive artist, worked for Mercedes, did the original sketches of the car. And I said, I want to mimic that as much as possible. So with my friend, my other friend, Nick, from Lauren Teal, who does these kind of modern taillights, we mocked up a one-off rear LED taillight. But we had to go through 5 or 6 iterations of the 3D printing to get to a point where I can mount the chassis of the light in the car. I welded up the rest of the chassis, and then you can screw the bulbs in to have this very modern, integrated, beautiful 3D print. So that's one of the projects. And I'm actually curious on your side. So if you could sort of talk about, in fact, here's a piece of it, right?
Yeah.
This is definitely a piece of the 3D print. The vision of kind of how you had to walk into it and what you had to do from a problem-solving standpoint.
Yeah, so coming into it now, basically just as I'm bringing in all the 3D printing expertise essentially into the build. You already had a little bit. You had the mock-ups basically before I even come in, right? So there's a little.
But no 3D printing expertise, 0%. Is what I have.
Yeah. So I'm basically kind of thinking how do we get our large machines into elevating the rest of the project, doing the air intake for the back now.
Yes.
Doing that on anything smaller than this would be probably way. It's a lot of extra work to do all the unions for the extra pieces.
Yeah.
With these, we can break it down into larger chunks and still get pretty good usable parts out of it. But going into it, a lot of it is more thinking about how these parts, what strength or what forces they're taking in the build, where they need to be mounted, and then a lot of it comes into just ease of use for you installing them. I don't want to print things that are going to have a lot of support structure or rougher surfaces in the areas where we'd be mounting these lights. So that does kind of come into play on how these are printed. The rest of the mounting kind of cuts through this area, and I still printed that at an angle because I wanted the threads on these to come out as clean as possible.
Yeah. As a guy who, I'm very comfortable with taking a piece of steel and cutting it and welding it and modifying it until it's a thing.
Yeah.
But it's amazing, this kid asked me, I want to get into the automotive world. I'm like, learn Fusion 360. Learn CAD software, with garage guys like me, just making little parts that they need, air intakes and intakes on their engines and things like that. There's a lot of opportunity. And what's so funny about this, you guys can't really see all this stuff. This whole office is full of solutions that are like 3D printed solutions, like little brackets that are on the side of the table. The fact that we have the ability to do that, it's something that 5 years ago, I couldn't have thought of. Even a year ago. And I'm starting to see these people on YouTube that are like, oh yeah, I needed this bracket. Or a great example is if you have an older car and a lot of the Del rim and stuff like that is brittle and it breaks, and you can just reprint and make a new piece that is no longer available. Adam Carolla talked about Jay Leno doing that with 3D. Yeah. He's got his Lamborghini Miura, and some ignition piece broke, and he was like, they don't make it anymore. Like, it just doesn't exist. And so he had a partial, and they were able to take the partial and extrapolate from that into make a regular one and 3D print it at Jay Leno's place, and then he's got this perfect replacement part. Yeah. I just think that's so cool for car guys.
It's one of the best things, and honestly, having just these machines more widely available, it's bringing like you said, send, cut, send, you're still sending the plans out and they send the parts to you, but they're still your parts with your logo. And it just makes everything a lot more, I don't know if it's more personal, but it's more attached to you. You know, it's still your design, your parts, and if you can print them on your machine, you know, you just have more ownership over the whole process.
If you go to SEMA, if you went 5 years ago, you would just see cars, modify whatever. And now you go to SEMA and you see cars modified and it's got like their own personal, like again, their brand is embedded in it, or there's some crazy carbon fiber thing that has, some bracket that's got, all of their info on it, or it looks completely factory. And I think that part where you can make things look completely factory is bonkers to me. I was interviewing Ann Anstead, who was the mechanic on Wheeler Dealers for the last couple seasons until this year. And we were talking about the garage being this almost like the place of solace. Mm-hmm. It really is. Like it can really, because what happens when you're working on a car, like when you're restoring it, is pretty much all you're doing is problem solving. You've got like a rust patch and you've got to figure out how to recreate this piece, and you've got to solve the problem. I think the really cool part about having now that I know about this, it makes me start working on problems that I didn't even know existed. I'm like, oh, I can improve this. And I couldn't have even thought of improving it a couple of years ago. Whereas now I'm like, oh, this whole console can be changed now because it can be 3D printed. Yeah. We can completely change how this piece of the car looks. By the way, if only to make this beautiful 3D printed part and then make a buck that you could use to wrap in carbon fiber and make a carbon fiber piece that's perfect for whatever you want. There's so many options of how you can start thinking about customizing a car, or like you do in your office, you can improve your own experience in your car. Like you're like, what if you 3D printed like a phone mount or something like that? Has to happen all the time. And you could make one that looks like Toyota did it in 1985. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's the part that's super cool.
Stuff, customize it, really kind of make it yours. And you mentioned like now that you have the printing capability, it just opens up the possibilities. People will ask all the time, like, what can you do with it? What is it good for? And it's like,
what can't you do? Like, exactly, you literally can do anything you want.
It's just it's a tool that opens up all the possibilities of being able to just produce really anything in a day if you need it, essentially. And then, of course, the larger it gets. But yeah,
it's this cool thing where like you could think about. You could almost walk around your house, or if you're a car person, and go, what bugs me about my car? Well, I don't like that little piece is cracked, or that knob is missing, or I don't like how I've got to like reach this far to get my sunglasses. All right, well, why don't you make a sunglasses mount that clips into your visor, which you could totally do with 3D printing. Like there's so many things that you could think about that years ago would not have been. Like I was thinking right now, I'm like, oh, I need a cup holder for my vintage, like my 69 911.
Yeah, those did not have them.
And it's like, let's talk about that for a second. So you probably have done things like that before, but if we were to start from baseline, first I'd have to figure out where I would want the cup holder to mount, which in this case would be probably bolted into the bolts that mount the passenger side seat. This is a small car, and I want to reach over and just be able to grab it. So I basically want the cup holder to be on the floor right next to the tunnel on the right-hand side. So we'd start with, all right, well, first of all, how much width do we have to get a mounting surface in there? Then what's the spacing between the holes? I've got two M5 Allen bolts that need to go in there. And then how do we want to do the cup holder part? And you go, okay, how big does the cup holder have to be, blah, blah, blah. And then you just have to figure out how to connect the two and then how to make it strong enough. And that's prototype 1. Yeah,
and I mean, that's the same kind of series of steps that you would do for any car or any modification, but it's different every time from vehicle to vehicle or just from person to person, like you said, if you want it differently stylized. But you would still basically follow that same process of where does it need to fit into, what are the mounting points that you have to secure, or what mounting points can you pick and add in. But it's all going to be up to, like, you have complete creative freedom over where that goes and how it mounts in and what the final result is.
What about for people that don't have, that aren't 3D modeling people, but they're like, I want to do this, and I can take the measurements. Are there things they can do from that point to eventually get something made? Maybe not necessarily through here, but like, do you work with people on Fiverr or like, you know what I'm saying? Like, do I have an option if I'm not, because I'm not a 3D printing, like I don't have a lot of 3D software. I have a little bit, but not a ton.
Yeah.
Enough that I can go, here, can you make this into a thing that works?
Yeah, so it's like, there's kind of there's a little barrier to entry into the CAD program. You just got to open it and kind of learn the basic tools, and then you can get pretty far with just a basic sketch and extrusions and subtractions. But I think there is a bit higher of a step to get into things doing scoops and lofts and all kinds of other details. So if you are starting off from just, I have an idea, essentially.
Yeah.
If you're able to get the dimensions and then sketch out something, I don't know any specific ones, unfortunately, but I know there's a lot of like freelance people out there who are doing CAD modeling.
Yeah.
Or I think some of the bigger online like printed part companies will help with the modeling of the parts if you can give them the sketch.
Yeah.
So Shapeways, I think, is one of the other ones that's pretty popular. Xometry is pretty popular.
Okay. And those are like kind of the send, cut, send version of 3D printing?
Yeah, basically exactly the send, cut, send. You would either send them the STL. I know usually they take the models, but they probably wouldn't have too much trouble just going off of a sketch too. I don't know what the services are. But yeah, like aside from having the machine and learning how to do everything on your own, there's tons of companies available that are taking parts like this, printing them, and giving them out to you. But it is, you're paying for that service a whole lot. Whereas with like things that we do, if you do have a Raise3D machine, we personally are always here to help and suggest and like recommend things. Yeah. It's just, unfortunately, we don't make the CAD software. So
is Fusion 360 a good one to?
Oh, I love
okay.
Fusion 360.
Yeah. All right, so I'm of the opinion, if you are really a hobbyist on up, like if you have a garage where you work on cars and you plan on working on more, like if I got into the business of like flipping or restoring Porsches like for a living, or even as like a pretty big side hustle, I think having a 3D printer in shop would be as important as having a full toolkit and a welder and stuff like that, personally. Like, I just think it's a tool that is necessary in 2022 as a vital part of an operation.
Yeah, I mean, and they really do cement themselves in that niche of being really necessary. Once you get into the flow of working with them, you're just printing everything.
Yeah.
If you can print a part, you're gonna print that part.
Right. I don't know how to do it well yet, but one of the reasons I got this iPhone 13 Pro is that it has the LiDAR.
Yep.
It's got LiDAR, and what that means is I can literally scan, maybe not that's a complex part, but I could scan this 3D and bring it into my Fusion 360 and then make a part from it. I could make my Super Lube silicone lubricating grease holder that fits right here on the side of my desk. And that's what's amazing. That's like literally the reason I got this particular phone.
Yeah.
It's like part of my business operation.
Yeah, having a scanner, it's just adding on the extra tools to be able to like scan parts or scan the fittings of where you need them.
Yeah.
A lot of the other like engineering industries just use $10,000 scanners for really, really high accurate scans, but you can still work off of files from things just off of like the iPhone camera.
Yeah. So we met at SEMA, which is the biggest car customization conference in the world, 150,000 people, and I was on my way through and I saw that I knew what I had coming with my 3D printing on my car, and I was like, oh, I wonder if these guys would be into it, and like they were all in. You guys were all in right from the beginning. What were in terms of Raise3D, what were their goals going into SEMA? Like, what are some of the things you wanted the world to know about your capabilities, not only with individual printers, but like as a company, as a bringing what you're bringing to the table?
Yeah. So we want to be in. We're kind of on like the higher end of still being able to be pretty affordable for anyone who's doing car restorations or bringing them into any kind of workshop, but they still are reliably producing the highest quality parts out of some of the best materials you can get, like the high-grade carbon fiber nylons and things that have pretty high carbon percentage, things on like the ETCF. That one's very specialized for that material. So a lot of the printing parts, like doing things out of ABS, and they were mostly used for like cosmetic fill-ins or other details.
Yeah.
But we do think that there is a place for the machine to use those more durable materials, give you longer term use parts and parts that you could actually put into like building the assemblies, like the lights, things that are going to be taking forces and actually be highly critical parts.
Yeah.
So we want to push the envelope on what you're able to get out of the machine and add into bigger builds like this.
Yeah. You say the higher end. I don't know what's the range of your pricing on your printers?
Yeah, so the range is going to be closer to, I think, 3,500 for the E2, and that one's the IDEX machine.
Okay.
So this one over here.
Yeah.
And again, all of our machines are spec'd out to do carbon fiber nylon, full range of materials.
Yeah.
We do have our own branded materials, but you're not limited specifically to ours. So third-party materials, again, if it's compatible with the machine's temperatures, you're basically free to go ahead and run it.
Yeah, but $3,500.
Yeah.
And you think, and to what? What is it? What's the highest one?
The highest
biggest
one is going to be like the Pro 3 Plus, so closer to this size, the newest version.
Which is what?
This one.
20?
It's no, gosh, no, it's going to be 20,000. This one's closer to, I think it's 75.
Oh, all right.
Yeah,
so
7,500. So still not
I'm only
too bad.
taking issue with what you're saying. Well, it's at the higher end. Do you know how much tools cost? Have you been around tools?
Actually, I have not worked on.
Dude,
getting
a
tools like that
basic toolkit is 20 grand for a garage, like all day long. A lift is 5 to 10.
Yeah.
It's not like these aren't extravagant expenses when you're opening or you have like, I would do this all day long. This is easy. Give me slap it on a credit card, put it on a payment plan, and we're good to go. Man, I think that the economics of a shop are bigger than that, especially when you talk about, you're buying a car, a vintage Porsche in my world, for a really rough one for, let's say, 15 to 30 grand, that you're going to put 80 into and sell for 200.
Yeah. So
$3,500 isn't that bad?
It's basically nothing.
It's really not that's a good tool. Like a good welder is $2,500. So I don't know. I wouldn't go super high end in that realm.
Yeah. So I mean, again, we say higher end, not for price, but I would say definitely for the quality.
Is it size and speed? Is that what makes it? So this is obviously way bigger than this.
It's mostly size.
Mostly size.
Yeah. So just in the general kind of 3D printing market, like getting into larger machines like this, you just get higher and higher into $10,000 for something larger than this.
Right. But it's worth noting though that you can always, first of all, you're not probably making like a body panel out of 3D printing. It's probably not a thing.
Yeah.
But with experienced 3D printing designer people like yourself, you could take a piece that's this big and break it up into 4 different pieces that slot together. And then as a car guy, we can glue it, epoxy it, sand it, put a little thin layer of filler on it, and it looks like one piece, which is exactly what we'll be doing with my. We'll either be doing that or making a buck, a negative buck out of it, and doing the whole thing in carbon fiber. But we'll talk about that another time.
I mean,
it's
like
going to be very cool.
It's all problem solving.
Yeah.
So even if we have, the problem is the thing we want to make is too large for the build volume. It's always how do we break it down? How do we want to mount them together? And you have complete freedom on how that assembly gets broken down.
Yeah.
I mean,
I love we haven't fully fleshed out the design of the air intake yet, but whenever you see like a modern car, like a prototype sketch, and there are these beautiful, flowy, future-looking things, I love that we can actually do that. Because I've made the scoop out of metal already. I've done a metal version of the scoop we're doing, and it's like a scoop. I mean, there's not much I can do because I'm forming it out of metal. Because we're forming it out of this 3D printed material, we can make it flow and do super cool things that I would never be able to do otherwise.
Yeah, so we really could, rather than doing just one bend or whatever is easiest to bring in the metal.
Like I can add texture on it and do cool things that couldn't be done before. So that part's really exciting to me.
Yeah, so I'm definitely looking forward to that. We'll get working on the scoop. That's the next thing lined up for the build,
That's the next thing,
The lights are done.
Yeah. It'll probably take a minute, but.
Yeah, so we'll get that ball rolling on that, and then what's after the intake? You mentioned the doors, right? So
got intake. Yeah. I need to do the brackets for the quarter windows, and then maybe something along the lines of, especially with the kind of stiffness that thing has, and you mentioned we probably could drive a truck over it if we wanted to. I might want to design a shift housing out of that material that looks super cool and is super flowy, and maybe something like in a console, something like that would be cool.
Yeah, so definitely having the carbon fiber now stuff in the consoles. And
sort of attacking the interior stuff. Yeah,
should be cool, but definitely looking forward to it.
It's awesome.
I think we are gonna wrap up for today on the stream.
Sounds good. Sounds good to me. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, seriously, thank you very much for coming in.
That's great.
And then, of course, we're going to be keeping working on this, so you'll be seeing more of this as we keep going forward.
Cool. Rennch.com/YouTube.
Yeah, go check them out.
Subscribe now.
Seriously. All right, thanks, everybody.
Thanks.